Jung Seed Company has the largest selection of non-GMO seeds, plants, and supplies online. They are a family-owned and operated company since 1907. Use code 15FG podcast to receive 15% off your order at jungseed.com. Hello and welcome to another episode of Let's Argue About Plants, the podcast for people who love plants.
But not always the same ones. I'm Carol Collins. I am the editor-in-chief at Fine Gardening.
Hey everybody, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're listening. I'm Danielle. I am the editorial director of Fine Gardening magazine. And today we are talking about, you know what, Carol, just take it away. This is your episode, baby.
Well, we're talking about our favorite vegetables. So I know you have favorite vegetables, Danielle. Don't lie to me.
I do. I have whittled down, admittedly, my vegetable garden over the past several years. You know, it keeps getting, let's say, edited. It keeps getting edited. And to be honest now, I grow tomatoes, squash, cucumbers, and peas. Pretty much. That's pretty much it. I will do some garlic as well, and herbs. And that's really what my family eats. And I think, you know, I got to the point where instead of trying to grow it all and not do a very good job, I'm going to try and grow minimal things that I really like and try to do a better job. Does that make sense?
Totally makes sense. I've kind of done the same thing, you know, like potatoes, you throw them in the ground and, you know, ignore them until you harvest them. I love potatoes, so I do a lot more potatoes than I used to.
Oh, that's fascinating. That's really fun. Yeah.
But it didn't make my list somehow for today because it's the photos, right? It's just like, do you all want to look at a picture of a potato plant for 5 minutes while I talk about it? I don't know.
Yes. Oh my gosh. It'll be really funny to hear Peter's segment on this episode because he talks about potatoes being kind of shady. You know, like they hang out underground. They're a little nefarious. Well, why don't you kick me off with, you know, if push came to shove and you could only grow one vegetable, I know that's a hard one, what would it be?
Well, okay, so I always have to have tomatoes in my garden.
Ditto.
Always, right? And so if I could only grow one vegetable, and technically it's a fruit, I know, but it would be a tomato, and it would be a Brandywine tomato.
Nice.
And Brandywine is more of a type than a cultivar, but there is sort of a straight Brandywine type. I grow several types, or have over the years. My hands down favorite, I think, is German Johnson. So that's Solanum, Lycospericum. Oh, I don't think I got that botanical name right, but who cares?
Let's not do the botanical names.
Right,
we don't do it in the magazine. We're not going to do it here. Nobody cares. It's a tomato. Its name is
German Johnson.
Hooray. That's all we need to know.
And I think it's Lycopersicum, but whatever. So German Johnson, Brandywine type. It's an heirloom type. A lot of places carry it. It is recognized for higher productivity, sort of a earlier, more uniform and slightly smaller Brandywine tomato. Mm-hmm. So the usual size is like 8 to 16 ounces. However, you occasionally get a lunker, and a
lunker. That's an official botanical term right there, lunker.
So the photos in the show notes is one that I got a few years ago that was almost 2 pounds. And one of my photos shows it on the scale, so for proof. And it had 3 lobes, and it was kind of gnarly looking. But actually, surprisingly, you know, the ones that are all lobed, sometimes there's a lot of waste because decay gets in between the folds or whatever. That even when you get these sort of gnarly shaped ones in German Johnson, still productive, still mostly useful tomato. And when I cut it up, it was like a whole plate of tomatoes. Delicious, delicious flavor. I love my tomatoes acidic. It has just the perfect acidity, great, like smooth texture, a lot of flesh to seed, higher flesh to seed ratio. And I get most of my veg seeds from Johnny Selected Seed. They carry the regular leaf strain of German Johnson rather than the potato leaf strain, which they say is earlier and more productive than the potato leaf strain. Now, these are not going to be the first tomatoes that ripen in the garden. It takes at least 75 to 80 days from the time you put it in the garden to maturity. So, people that are showing pictures of tomatoes on the 4th of July, this is not going to be that tomato.
Yeah.
But I wanted to throw a tip out there that there really is no advantage to starting your tomatoes extra early. Like some people do it like 2 months before their average last frost date. And unless you are ready to pot on your tomato seedlings as soon as they fill out the cell, you're going to end up with a root-bound seedling. And those are going to actually sort of have a setback when you put them back in the garden, and they might actually produce later than something that you started, say, 5 weeks before you're actually going to set it out. So that's my main tip for tomatoes, because for years I was thinking, oh, I want early tomatoes. I'm going to start some of them in February.
Yeah.
And needless to say, that did not work out for me. So, and
use your last frost date too, right? Because, just in case anyone from Florida is listening, yes, you do want to start your tomatoes in February, but use your frost date. Use your frost date.
Use your frost date. And what I usually do for tomatoes is I add 2 weeks to the last frost date. So for here in our part of Zone 5, our average last frost, May 10th. So I am looking at sort of more late May to put my tomatoes out.
Nice.
So, and then working back from that, like maybe 6 weeks before that is when I would be starting the seedlings.
Nice.
Consistent watering is going to be your friend with any tomatoes that you're growing, and mulching under plants is very helpful for retaining soil moisture and preventing soil from splashing up on the leaves, which is one of the main ways that you're going to get the many diseases that tomatoes are prone to. And honestly, I don't know that there's any way, especially with the heirloom varieties, to avoid having some disease, but most tomatoes can pull through and produce just fine, even if they are a bit disease riddled.
Yeah. Do we know, I love with heirloom tomatoes that a lot of times they have a story. So is this a German variety that came from Germany? Do we know?
I do not think it was a German.
Okay.
From Germany. I think it was people of German descent in the United States that developed this, but I'll be honest, I didn't look it up recently,
okay,
so
right.
I'm not going to throw out facts that I don't know. But my impression is that this is a U.S. cultivar that has been around for a very long time, and I who knows, but presumably somebody named Johnson was involved.
Right. Yeah, of German descent. A Johnson of German descent. I know a family of Johnsons. Maybe they are. I'll ask them. Totally with you. If it's down to one vegetable, it's tomatoes. There is nothing like a BLT, like that midsummer August, you are sick of cooking, it is totally hot, make a BLT, and that sounds like the perfect BLT tomato. It is just luscious and delicious, and that balance of acidity and sweet. And I feel like we're going to get a lot of emails that people are going to be like, because I saw your list, you didn't see mine, but nowhere on either one of our lists is the coveted Sun Gold. And for me, Sun Gold tomatoes are too sweet. Like that, it's just, I understand why people love them. I understand it's a good gateway tomato for, little ones who don't like vegetables, but Sun Gold is too sweet. I like a little bit of acid in my tomato as well. And it sounds like German Johnson fits that bill perfectly.
It does. And I do love Sun Gold. Just
Do
for the
you?
record. I do,
Yeah.
but it is hard. Like, it is hard to only grow one plant, and that's all you need for the sun gold, right? Otherwise,
Yes.
it just, you have too many, and
Yeah.
yeah, they get
Huge.
ahead of you.
Huge. Well, I'm going to hop on your bandwagon because for years and years, Brandywine was the gold standard of just the cultivar that everyone was like, oh, it's a cultivar. And then there were Brandywine types that came about. And I made the switch many years ago because I was finding inconsistencies in the seed that I was getting that was labeled Brandywine. Because probably like it had gone so far out, the open pollination had gone so far out that it wasn't what I was growing 10 years ago as a Brandywine tomato. So I was looking for like a new cultivar, a new variety of Brandywine. And I settled about maybe 4 or 5 years ago on Rose. It's Rose Heirloom tomato. Again, just like German Johnson you just talked about, it matures in 75 to 80 days. This is a bigger tomato. This does get its standard 10 to 16 ounces. And much like you, I think this is every gardener, right? It's like when you get the lunker, you got to take a picture of it. So my lunker picture is me holding an 18 ouncer. I mean, it's not huge, but it's an 18 ouncer and it's in both of my hands. And it took both hands to hold this tomato up. But Rose is really cool because it's a pink tomato. Now, Brandywine is like a pinkish red when people see Brandywines. This is a pure pink. This is gratuitous, but in the photo, I actually have like coral colored nails on because I think I had a bridal shower to go to. And it kind of matches that coral color. It's like the color of summer. So I really think that that's, kind of indicative of when it's at its peak ripeness. Look for that summer corally color. It's delicious. It's the perfect blend of sweet and acidic. It is that BLT tomato, and it's indeterminate, much like a lot of the heirlooms. There are very few heirloom determinate tomatoes, and I think everybody who's probably listening knows this, but determinate tomatoes have a predetermined size. Usually they're about 4.5 to 5 feet tall, max their entire lives, not a lot of pruning. Indeterminate tomatoes will grow for an indeterminate amount of height. So, 7 to 8 feet tall is not unheard of with an indeterminate tomato. So you can, do a lot of pruning to kind of keep it in and keep it a little bit more managed. Rose is also a perfect tomato to be growing on a trellising system where you're kind of weaving or basket weaving those succulent tomato stems in and out of a basket weave. Think about what you would typically grow peas on. This is a good, indeterminate tomatoes for the most part are a good candidate for reusing that pea trellis a little bit later in the season. I like to do, because we live in Connecticut, you mentioned earlier, we are a 5B, 6A zone. Never know when that frost is coming in the fall. And with these longer to maturity tomatoes, a lot of these indeterminate tomatoes, they put a ton of energy into producing more and more and more foliage and little tiny green fruit that is never going to ripen. So I am ruthless. I get in there on Labor Day in our zone in New England, and I hack everything to my height for an indeterminate tomato. I am 5'3", so I sit there and with head shears, I just really cruel and ruthlessly hack down those tomatoes, those indeterminate tomatoes, to ensure that all the fruit that's set below that, 5'3" marker actually ripens before the first frost kills the plants. And Rose is a perfect candidate for that. I also love that this is a massive producer. What is it? Mortgage lifter tomato looks great in the pictures, but when you're a tomato plant and you're only giving me a cool 6 tomatoes the entire season, that is not cutting it. That is not paying the mortgage in my garden. So Rose produces quite a few. I mean, it wouldn't be unheard of to get about 2 dozen good sized tomatoes, and I feel like that's a pretty good yield on a larger format tomato. So yeah, I mean, decent disease resistant for an heirloom, as we mentioned. This is not a hybrid variety. This is something that isn't, doesn't have bred in that disease resistance, but some natural resistance to blight. And I seemingly always get some form of blight in my garden each year, regardless of, what happens in the weather and what happens in, me starting the seeds. But this rose holds up. So now I'm getting hungry that we've talked about 2 Brandywine tomatoes in a row. All right, okie dokie pokey. Another tomato?
No.
Okay.
I could. It could be a whole episode on tomatoes, I am sure, but I figured we should do some extra. So another thing that I always grow since, like 30 years is sugar snap peas. And I also love English peas, and that's what my parents grew. But, what I realized a few years back is if I'm not buying it in the grocery store, like for, the rest of the year, I probably shouldn't be growing it in my garden. So I buy a lot of sugar snap peas in the off season. And so when I can, I love to have them in the garden. And in 2023, part of the seed samples that came from John Sheeper's Kitchen Garden Seeds included sugar magnolia snap pea. That's Pisium sativum. Sorry, I forgot we're not doing the Latin names.
No, go for it.
But this is important later. So remember that sugar magnolia is a culinary pea, but it is very beautiful. So it makes bicolored pink and purple red flowers. Ooh. And those flowers are edible. And here's why I want to talk about the culinary versus what are so-called sweet peas. Sweet peas are a completely different genus and species than culinary peas. They are Lathyrus odoratus, and they are 100% not edible. They are poison. They are skull and crossbones.
For anybody not watching the YouTube video, I did the sign of like choking and dying on
like
screen.
Little X's over the eyes.
Do not eat.
Right. So that's, I wanted to say that because the flowers of sugar magnolia snap pea look like sweet peas. They are beautiful. They've got like a warm violet and pink sort of bicolor thing going on. So even before you start to get the peas, you've got just like this beautiful display. But as a rule, I only grow them in my vegetable garden, not my landscape. I don't want anybody making any mistakes and eating the wrong kind of pea flowers.
Yeah.
So there you have it. But they are like all snap peas, easy to grow, one of the earliest crops to produce. They produce a harvest in 70 days from the time you drop those seeds in the ground. You can do that in early to mid-spring. You probably want to wait until after you think the frost is mostly done, but unlike, tomatoes, they probably won't be killed if you get like some kind of, very late frost that just happens to hit. And especially when the plants are very small. They're pretty cold tolerant. They then produce, after the flowers are done, and sort of on a rolling basis, these inky bluish purple pea pods. Ooh. And the one thing that I would say is that it doesn't hold its color when you cook it, but they look amazing if you put it on a crudité plate or, break them up into salads. And you could even sprinkle some of those pretty pea blossoms as well as some of the earliest peas on top of your salad. Amazing, colorful garnish. They will be sweetest if you pick them before they're 100% full. So
Okay.
you want them sort of halfway. You want to see, the pods start to swell. And I would say the best way to gauge the optimal picking time is liberal sampling in the field. That means eating them right off the vine. And
You have Carol's permission.
you will dial it in and you will figure out sort of what is the optimal point to harvest them. But they produce heavily. And the other thing I love about this variety is that the vines get really tall. They can get up to 8 feet tall, which equals more productivity. I grew them on one side of the trellis, and then another variety that only gets 2 feet tall is on the other side of the trellis. And so the contrast between the yield of the shorter one and the larger one was quite dramatic. One tip for peas of any kind is that you should harvest very carefully to keep the vines productive. So either snipping the peas off or holding the vine when you pull the pea off, and you want to get the whole thing, including the little top, I don't know what that's called, but the spot where it connects onto the stem, the hat. Get the hat off, because if you don't, the plant thinks there's still a pea there and it's sending energy where it doesn't need to. But if people that are not experienced might just sort of grab onto the peas and pull, and you're going to break stems, and those stems will no longer be productive if you crimp them off or break them, and they're kind of fragile. Other tip from my dad, back in the day, he would not allow us into the pea patch for harvesting if it was wet. So if it had been raining or if there's dew on it in the morning. And he said that was because that's when you're going to spread fungal diseases through the plants. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And he was taking a lot of biology classes at the time. He was like a non-traditional student when I was a kid. And so I think he was actually getting scientific information from somebody.
That actually makes sense for a lot of like vegetable harvesting. Like you would be like pulling that through, regardless of what the crop is.
Exactly. Any crop that is prone to fungal diseases, that's probably a good protocol. And I've never questioned it. I've always done it. And I don't tend to get diseases on peas, so I don't know if it works or if it's just an old dad's tale, but
nope.
There you have it.
Dad law right there.
Yeah, but this is one you're definitely going to need to trellis. Like I said, it can get up to 8 feet tall. So, my favorite trellis, I put 2 tall stakes in the ground. I connect the top and bottoms of those stakes with wire, and then I run burlap, twine up and down in sort of a narrow V shape between the top and bottom wires. And that gives you a trellis that it takes about half an hour to put up. And then when it's time for the pea vines to go onto the compost, you just cut that whole situation down and onto the compost it goes, because the twine is compostable.
And I would think too, because, we've had letters come in where, a lot of like that plastic kind of mesh netting tends to catch birds, tends to catch things that you really don't want to catch that come into it. So I would think that your system, Carol, that avoids it, because it's these long lengths of kind of organic material.
Yeah. It doesn't trap animals or birds, and it is, it's environmentally friendly is how I would.
And it works.
And it works. It works great. It holds the vines right where they need to be until you're done with them.
That's awesome. All right, you heard it here. Say the cultivar of this pea again.
Sugar magnolia. So anybody that gets a Grateful Dead song stuck
in
their head, you can blame me.
Now I'm gonna think of that. Yep. It's in there for the rest of the day. All right, we will not regale you with any singing on this episode. All right. Well, so one of the 3, maybe 4 vegetables that I still grow are cucumbers, but I am very discerning about my cucumbers. I like a European long / some people just call it the universal English cucumber, the burpless cucumber. I mean, how many common names can we have for those? very long, very thin-skinned, very dense, meaty, not a lot of seeds cucumbers that are just absolutely delicious. And here's how discerning I am about my cucumbers. If I can't find the seeds, which has happened, for Tyria, Tyria cucumber, I will not grow cucumbers that year. And that has only happened to me once. And for those who are curious, High Mowing Seed has carried Tyria for the last few years. So I haven't gone without. But it is an absolutely the best producer of cucumbers that I have ever had. It is consistent. The length of the cucumbers always comes in at about 13 to 14 inches long. They're fairly thin. It's super sweet, meaty, low seed count, all the things that you've come to, know and love from all of those Crayovac stupid cucumbers in the grocery store, but just such a better taste. Just that crisp, delicious, cucumbery taste. We eat a lot of cucumbers in my family. I use them in cocktails. My favorite is the jalapeno cucumber margarita in the summer, which I am just a fan of. And I love with, the English cucumbers, when you're muddling, you don't have to peel them because you're not going to get that bitter skin taste that a lot of people shy away from for the reasons that we all know. They give you gas. They're not very friendly. I do cucumber salads. I do all sorts of pickles with these English cucumbers, which, you harvest them a little bit smaller, and you can cut them into spears when you're doing any of your pickling. Obviously, there's no way you're shoving, a 13-inch cucumber into a jar in its whole form, but slicing up for, bread and butter pickles, if that's what you prefer. They really are good keepers as well. They're not something that kind of turns into that gelatinous mush, which I feel like a lot of very heavily seeded varieties do. This is a big plant. This is 7 to 8 feet. This plant will vine. And much like you, how I grow my cucumbers are big teepees, basically. So these big tutors that are, 3 stakes. I wire it with florist wire up at the top. And then I run that natural organic, sisal twine all the way around, wrapping each of those 3 poles as I go so it doesn't slip and slide up and down. And then with cucumbers, I feel like they're like toddlers. You just have to really, kind of direct them in the direction that they need to go. So I find that, of course, immediately I'll plant the seeds direct sowing right at the base after the first frost. Generally for me, I don't get to it until Memorial Day. So the end of May, but they all want to go in the opposite direction. They don't want to grow up the tutor, up the teepee at first. So I just start to kind of weave them in a little bit. And as soon as you give them a leg up, just like a toddler, you point them in the right direction, then they start vining all on their own. And it's pretty, step away, they do their own thing. I also find that when you're growing in that fashion, in that, kind of triangular cone shape, that it's easier to see the cucumbers because, it's green on green, folks. It's not easy to see these things. And before you know it, when they get oversized, they can grow up to 16, 18 inches long. That's a massive cucumber. Nobody needs a cucumber that big. And then they do start to get a little seedy. I will say you want to grow these up instead of on the ground because these long cucumbers, when they hit the ground or they have any sort of obstruction, they tend to kind of twirl around, they snake up, and so they end up looking like these little curly cues. It doesn't make them taste bad. It just makes it harder if you're doing pickling or anything like that to harvest them. Also, they look a little weird, kind of like anaconda snakes. So if you have a snake thing like me, you don't want them to look like that. So keep it up. Keep them up. And basically, 58 days to maturity. Not that long, that's a pretty fast turnaround time. You figure if you're doing it by the end of May, you're getting those in. By the end of July, you're getting fruit, which mine are just just starting. So depending on how quickly I need to get photos for this episode up, you might see some in my garden this year. If not, I've got some photos from past years. But again, tested a lot of English cucumbers. Tyria, Tyria, my favorite variety. Shout out to High Mowing Seeds. Alrighty, Carol. What else is on the must-grow all-time favorite vegetables list?
All right. So I have a green bean that I absolutely love and have been growing for years.
No.
No. Do you not like green beans, Danielle?
I don't. We never argue. This podcast name is Let's Argue About Plants. I think green beans taste like wood.
Oh, you're just not eating the right green beans.
No, and then when I do like them, it's because they're covered in butter and garlic. And I just like because they're butter and garlic. So maybe it is the variety choice. So sorry, I interrupted. Go ahead.
No, that's all right. Or you might have been a child whose parent grew green beans and you had to eat them like for 2 months straight in summer. Is that
Yes, and snap the little like pointy tips off of them constantly. And they're no.
Okay. I'm dredging up some painful memories for Danielle, but right. I love green beans, and I love Provider green beans. So it's like all everything we're talking about. It's an annual, super easy to grow. It is a bush bean. So it doesn't require trellising. It is very adaptable. You can plant this one earlier than most green beans because it will tolerate cool soil and cool air temperatures. And you can succession plant it every couple weeks if you want more of a spread out harvest. Instead of planting 100 of them in the first chance you get in spring, you can plant a block and then wait a couple weeks, plant another block, and you'll get sort of more of a rolling harvest that isn't, overwhelming you and making everyone in your life hate green beans for the rest of their life.
Hello.
So the plants take about 50 days from direct sowing to harvest, which is quick. It's like a month and a half. Heavy yields, great quality of beans. They're a couple inches long. They're always nice and straight, unless, they sometimes, like what you were talking about with cucumbers, if they run into something, then you'll get one that's shaped like a letter of the alphabet. But most of them nice and straight, so you can, pickling, dilly beans are a thing. Great for that. You need to plant your rows about 2 feet apart. So in my 3-foot wide beds, I can get 2 rows side by side. And then you're spacing the seeds about 2 inches apart, 1 inch deep. Thing with green beans, you need to remember, don't over fertilize, because then the plant will focus its attention on making a lot of foliage, not so many beans. But in the past, I made the mistake of not doing any fertilizer at all, and that's, they will tolerate it, but just a modicum of organic fertilizer or maybe just a little bit of compost added to the bed in spring will give you better yields and healthier plants. These are, like most beans, are open pollinated, and so you can save seed. I prefer to buy mine for consistency and disease control. But I buy this one in bulk. So
what does in bulk mean? Like how many?
Like the big packet, like 1,000 seeds. Like it's, quarter
wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that lasts me for years. But this year I am using up the last of a big batch. Another nice thing about beans in general is that the seed holds a long time. Like you can hold on to it for 2-3 years, and it will generally be just as good of germination as you would get from fresher seed. So that's a nice thing. But you do, use it up within 3 to 5 years, because it does sort of start to decline at the super old seed. But yeah, you can get this from a lot of different sources, and just a nice general, like, it's a good thing to plant with kids and maybe get the kids involved with harvesting, and maybe they'll like green beans a little better than this
Or maybe they'll be scarred for life. No, I'm kidding.
Like, send you out to the bean fields as punishment.
Gosh, yes. All right, sorry. This is not about me. This is not about me.
No. My only bean trauma is that the rabbits just love it. And they did get into my bean patch last year. And after that, it was like no more beans for Carol. So I've got to improve security this year, I think, because the rabbits are not going away.
Now, will they come after the bush after it's like past its like seedling phase? Will they still come out? Oh, wow.
Yeah, they eat the leaves, they eat the beans. So
it's not just the like
beans.
tender shoots that they like annihilate. Ooh.
They get in there, and it's just the right height to hide a mischievous bunny. So you don't even know they're in there, but then you come and you find like the inside is all hollowed out. They've gone through and eaten all the beans. They're so naughty.
We should talk about this a little bit. This is a little off topic, but you brought up the bunnies, and you've been a vegetable grower for eons. It's probably since birth. In your current veggie garden, veggie patch, are you completely fenced in?
I am fenced in, but it is not rabbit proof. I do not have a rabbit proof fence. They go under. Okay. And I have is deer fencing, which is plastic, and rabbits very easily can just nip right through those plastic.
Okay.
If I wanted to keep the rabbits out, I think I would need to put hardware cloth dug into the ground all the way around the perimeter of my garden, which is like hundreds of square feet. And, that's a big investment. Like, I can plant some extra beans, or what I'm thinking is that I fence in just the beans with rabbit-proof wire.
There you go. Yeah, we when I was on the fine gardening tour over in England, at one of the gardens that we went to, they almost had like these boxes that were like cages, like large boxes, but they were very pretty, it was like, and they were portable. So it was like whatever was being attacked at that particular moment, they kind of just picked it up and put it over. It kind of reminded me of like those chicken tractors, you just kind of moved it around with like where the bunnies or the gophers were attacking. And I thought, oh, that's pretty cool, because then, if you have a crop that just needs to be protected for a shorter period of time, it's, multi-use. So, yeah. Okay, good to know. Bunnies, ugh, they're cute, but man, they're destructive.
They are hungry, and they have nothing but time.
Wouldn't that be nice? Maybe I'll come back as a rabbit in my next life. Oh my goodness. All right. Well, so provider. Okay. All right. I'm with you. Carol, I have a question for you. French beans. Now they tend to be, is that a culinary styling that people do to regular old beans, green beans, or is that a specific thinner variety of bean?
I think it is, it's a type of bean. Okay. I think French beans are usually a pole bean instead of a bush bean. And like you said, I think they're thinner.
Okay.
But there's also a thing that my grandmother used to do called Frenching green beans, which she had this, it's hard to describe, but it was like a thing that would cut the bean into strips, and you push it through, and she called those Frenched green beans, and she would do that, then blanch them and freeze them, and then we would have Frenched green beans, throughout the year.
So that sounds pretty delicious. Okay, because I tend to like those better. I don't know why. Maybe because it's not as dense. It's not like chewing on a wood stick. Like, I like my sticks like more splintered out. I don't know, but okay. French style you could do to a normal green bean, or there are these thinner pole beans
Yeah,
that
these
would
cultivars.
be applicable.
Yeah, and I think they're harvested earlier. And
Okay.
so with any green bean, you can harvest them a little younger and then maybe you won't think they taste quite as woody.
Also, I feel like the question should be like, Danielle, how often do you eat, like, chew on sticks? Because, like, how do I know what sticks taste like? I don't know. It's like chewing on a toothpick. I just don't know. Yeah. All right. Provider. Provider beans, still a worthy vegetable. Take it from Carol. Don't listen to me. Because I'm boring and I'm just going to talk about another tomato right now.
All right, let's have it.
But I looked at our list and I thought, we should have some sort of cherry tomato on there, because I do feel like as far as success with tomatoes is concerned, you're more likely to have success with cherry tomatoes. It doesn't take as long for them to produce. Their days to maturity are lower. They tend to grow more weedy. So you have a good yield regardless of whatever you do or do not do correctly. And I think, like, my go-to that I'm always planting in my garden is called tomato berry, cherry tomato. And this is a unique strawberry shaped fruit that's about 1 inch by 1 inch. It's got those broad shoulders and kind of that blunt, kind of rounded tip to it. It really does look like a strawberry. They're produced in long, almost grape-like chains. So you get, the top basically ripens, and as you go down to the tip of the bunch of grapes, those are the green, so you get this rainbow effect on these bunches of cherry tomatoes. 60 days to maturity for this tomato. This is quick. This is almost like squash quick, as far as tomatoes go. This is an indeterminate variety. Again, this is a monster. You need one plant, just like you were saying with sun golds, Carol. Do not plant multiple tomato berries because they will take over your entire garden. Very viney, a great trellising tomato, because this, even more so than, rose tomato that I talked about, has these long stems that you can just wind in and out of any sort of trellising system. I'm thinking the one that you were describing for the peas, Carol, would be perfect for this tomato, and probably a lot of these cherry tomatoes. It makes it a lot easier to harvest them when you're, facing them as opposed to crawling underneath cages or whatever else. I want to put a caveat out there that there is a doppelganger called Gardener's Sweetheart. This is an unpopular opinion. I think they're the same darn cultivar. I really do. They look exactly the same. They produce the same amount, which is buckets, 5-gallon buckets full of these tomatoes, and taste very similar. This is a super meaty tomato. It is not watery. It is not seedy. And that is why it is my top sauce tomato. I grow this for sauce. And the reason being is that I just basically strip them off those long grape-like, kind of tendrils. I have gobs and gobs of them. I throw them all in the sauce pot. I cook them down. I take my stick blender, skin, seeds, everything, and I just blend it out. And because they're not very seedy and they are very thin-skinned and they're super meaty, it is the base of all of my tomato sauce. Now, I'm not precious about tomato sauce. I'm not like, only one kind of tomato in the sauce pot. I throw everything in there, but usually the base and this high pectin, because they're so meaty, really thickens up a sauce like nothing else. And people look at me like I'm crazy that I grow a cherry tomato as my sauce tomato. But 1 inch by 1 inch is pretty big. That is pretty big for a cherry tomato. We're not talking about these little like candy tomatoes that are the size of your pinky tip. These are pretty large. I already said 8 foot tall. That's what you can pretty much figure on with tomato plants. And there's really not much else to say. I love it. I think it's a really, really good plant. It is one that I looked back in my photos to see the first time, and I think the first time I planted this was in 2007. So, we're approaching 20 years, 18 years that I've been growing this same tomato. So I figured if it's lasted that long, it must be a winner. All right, Carol, let's bring it on home. We've created a really lovely vegetable patch. I like that our days to maturity have kind of spanned the gamut. We've given people peas, which are probably going to be the first thing that they're harvesting from the garden. We've given them cucumbers that come in a little later. We've given them some tomatoes that are both early and late tomatoes. What are you? Oh, beans. Don't forget the beans. If the bunnies don't get the beans, they're right in the middle there. So what is the last thing we're adding to our tomato patch?
Okay, so this is something that will come at the end of the season, so that,
love it.
End of
Love
the
it.
episode. And it is a pumpkin, but it is not an orange pumpkin. So it was COVID when I started growing pumpkins again, sort of more seriously. And I hadn't done it for years because they take up so much space in the garden. I'm not wasting space inside my fenced-in garden on pumpkins because they will take every inch of space and not leave any room for anything else. So in COVID, my child could not, in 2020, the child could not go to summer camp the way he usually did. So we hired him to do work around the landscape.
As a totally different kind of camp.
Yep, it was a different kind of camp. And, he learned valuable life lessons like, how to rip out a privet hedge. And that was one of the first projects he did. And we needed to plant something in place of this hedge that had been out next to the road for years. So I had all these pumpkin seeds. So we planted pumpkins out by the road. And the deer didn't bother them. The rabbits didn't bother them. We got great harvest. And so I thought, okay, now we can grow pumpkins outside of the fence. That's fantastic. So for, a few years after that, pumpkins outside the fence, no problems. Last year, the deer finally figured it all out because they love eating the pumpkins after Halloween. They'll go and eat the pumpkins off the compost pile. And some more smarter than average deer was like, hey, guys, look, the pumpkins are right in there. And so
they're not eating the plants, because the plants have kind of the sharp hair all over them in the leaves, but they wait until it starts to set the fruit.
Yes. And so I believed that, what I had been told, that they stay away from the plants because they're spiny. They don't like the feel of touching them. But boy, once they know there's a pumpkin in there to eat, they'll go right in. And, so I had to harvest everything and put them indoors basically until Halloween so that they wouldn't get eaten by deer and squirrels and rabbits, and everybody will eat it once they're harvested. So, but
what's the plan for this year?
This year I planted them inside the garden fence.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. And I just said, okay, fine. You get some real estate, because I do love growing pumpkins. So much fun to decorate. And then, some varieties like the one I'm going to talk about are actually like good eating, delicious, high quality for any kind of thing that you would use winter squash in. I'll cook it down and make a lot of pumpkin pie. That's one of the things I'll make, mini pumpkin pies to give out at Halloween. Halloween's a big deal in our neighborhood. So.
Okay, I'm going to insist, if it hasn't happened already, that we're going to, right now on the video, we're going to put up some of Carol's photos of her pumpkins that she and her son and does your husband get involved at all in the carving?
He's an observer now.
All right. Don't give him credit.
Financial supporter.
Okay, financial supporter. They do Halloween like nobody's business in your neighborhood, but your pumpkin displays, these are not your average carvings or your average pumpkins. They're incredible. Roll the videotape and put the photos on the page, on the podcast page.
All right. I will drop a link to some photos so that our producer can cut those in. It's mainly my son. He's the pumpkin artist. And it started really with those pumpkins that he ripped out the hedge. We planted pumpkins. Then that's where it all started, is he carved every one of those pumpkins that year, and Halloween was kind of sad in 2020.
Yeah, true.
Was,
but you made the best of it. It was
socially distanced, but we still did our pumpkin display. So anyway, porcelain doll is the pumpkin that I want to talk about. It is pink. It is, it really stands out against like a sea of orange pumpkins. This is one that really stands out. It's sort of a blocky shape. It has deep lobes. It's not square, but like, if it looks like a Minecraft pumpkin, but
nice.
Yeah. And like more delicious than your average pumpkin. It's quite gourmet, and at about 110 days from direct seeding to maturity, this cultivar is powdery mildew resistant. It, like most pumpkins, will produce these long rambling vines, huge leaves, needs lots of space. So there's one corner of my garden this year is just going to be pumpkins. But yeah, inside the fence and with a little bit of disease resistance, this is quite an easy plant to grow. You can just kind of let them do their thing. And, it's almost like when the leaves start to die back, you suddenly realize, like, look at all these pumpkins. It's like magic. It's, very exciting. So, those are the parts of gardening that really keep me coming back year after year. Because otherwise, like, let's face it, vegetable gardening is full of heartache.
It definitely
trials
is.
And tribulations. And like, most of us would have thrown in the towel years ago if it weren't for like, the fun of discovery and like, growing things that you really can't get many other places.
Very true. So how many pumpkins can we expect from porcelain doll off of one plant?
From one plant, I would say maybe 4 or 5.
Oh,
maybe.
Plenty.
Yeah, plenty. And, you generally would probably have more than one plant. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Now,
but
I have another question. This is actually the Danielle Ask Carol Questions podcast episode. So, taken from the fact that the only successful pumpkins that I've ever grown have been ones that started accidentally in the compost pile, are pumpkins heavy feeders? Do they need a lot of rich organic composty type material as their growing medium to really be successful?
They love it. And yeah, the one compost pile pumpkins, they are always the best. Yes. But yeah, what I do is I plant them in sort of hills, and I put a lot of compost directly on that hill so that they, sort of make them think they're growing on a compost pile, even though they are in the garden.
Okay. And do you do any supplemental side dressing of compost or liquid fertilizer of any kind throughout their span of life?
I don't, mainly because it gets pretty hard to get into the pumpkin patch once those vines are up. I'm like a deer. It's like, I don't want to be touching that.
Yeah. I gotcha.
And the other, there are all kinds of pests, like the squash borers and cucumber beetles and all, it's like you're supposed to cut the vine borers out of the stems. I don't have that kind of time.
Right.
And usually a plant that gets a vine borer can kind of grow through it, or at least make pumpkins before it like completely collapses. So.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. All right. Good to know. Okay. All right. So one pumpkin plant. So I feel like this is also important information too, that if one pumpkin plant of porcelain doll is giving you 4 or 5 pumpkins, like that's a good yield because I was thinking, oh, if you're only getting like one pumpkin, like, and I'm giving up 15 feet of real estate, like that's not, but all right, I like this ratio of 4 or 5 pumpkins. And they're a decent size too, right?
They're a decent size, like, sort of head sized.
Okay.
If you want to picture like that size. And the other thing I would throw out there is that you can drop a few pumpkin seeds into an open space in a regular garden border and just sort of let that vine ramble around along the edges and get your free bonus pumpkins and, call it a day.
Right, like an ornamental, you're saying, like a perennial shrubs, throw it in as your, little companion planting.
Just, somewhere that's not the vegetable garden, and, just have fun with it, because, like, what have you got to lose?
Yeah. That's so cool. Porcelain doll. A pink pumpkin. We had a pink tomato and a pink pumpkin. It's the pink episode. All right. Well, I'm going kind of in reverse order here, but I am going into the squash family. I'm going back to squash because that is the last. That is the holy, not the holy. Well, yeah, it's been the holy trinity. I like squash, cucumbers, and tomatoes. That's what's happening in my vegetable garden. And I will grow many different types of squash, summer squashes primarily. So, yellow squash, zucchinis, and everything along those lines. But I am never without patty pans, which are, if you can't picture them in your head right now, picture little UFOs, and that is what patty pan squash looks like. And a lot of people mistake them for gourds, ornamental gourds. They are not. If left on the vine forever, they do harden out their shell, and they can be used in decorations at the end of the season along with the pumpkins. But patty pan squash is probably the most delicious eating squash that I've ever had. They tend to be a meatier type of squash. They get no bigger. They shouldn't get any bigger than your hand, but the smaller that you harvest them, the sweeter they are, and the thinner the skin is as well. Very similar texture to a meaty zucchini or a meaty summer squash, a yellow squash. I just randomly picked one. Peter Pan is a very, very pale green patty pan variety of squash. It is so sweet. This is not a new variety. It's been around for a really long time. As a matter of fact, I think it was one of the very first All-American selections winners that I really cued into All-American selections and thought, oh, look at this. They do this whole program and tell us which vegetables and other flowering plants are worth growing. But this was a winner, and you're maxing out. You don't want it to get any bigger than like 8 ounces for these squash. Keep them as is. You can use them culinary wise in much the same ways that you use zucchini or any of the yellow squashes that are more standard. Summer squash is the catch-all that they use. Dicing it up, sauteing it, not a lot of seeds, lots of flesh, doesn't need to be peeled. The skin is delicious. But the other thing is that they're so small. They're used in a lot of gourmet markets and a lot of like higher end culinary restaurants by just slicing them in half and rubbing them down with some olive oil, maybe a little bit of a garlic clove rub over them, and grill them directly as such. They're beautiful and delicious. I mean, creamy and just so sweet. This is 50 days to maturity. Here's the other thing that I love about patty pans. Because they're a smaller squash, baseball sized or smaller, they mature faster than a zucchini does or a yellow summer squash does. So 50 days, direct sow. I do the same for my squashes as you do for your pumpkins. I kind of hill them up. I amend that hill pretty liberally with compost because no, nothing but my experience. This is not scientific, but they just do better, it seems. And the thing that I also like about the 50 days to maturity is that I put these in later. I direct sow my patty pans in June, which I'm now just starting to harvest. I harvested my first one yesterday here at the end of July, beginning of August. And by doing that, I've avoided most of the squash vine borer. They've already come out of the ground, found somewhere else, hopefully my neighbor's garden, to hatch, bore into the vines, wreak havoc, and a lot less of the squash beetles too, which, those can really skeletonize a plant and yes, the plant survives. I don't think it usually produces as much then. And especially with summer squash, it's like, gosh, I just want it to like be doing its thing right in the heat of August. So yeah, I love that you can sow this plant. They are smaller plants. They're bushing plants. They're not, a vine that kind of takes over like a cucumber or a pumpkin. They stay relatively small and just so sweet. And I just love, people freak out. You put a patty pan out and they're like, why are you feeding me gourds? This is not cool, but they're so good. So Peter Pan is a great one. There's a lot of different varieties out there. There's yellow versions, green and yellow striped versions, all of the above, but really a lovely, lovely vegetable to just round out our mix. And now, because everything sounds better with a British accent, here's Peter to talk about, Carol. He has a thing for English peas.
Right, I've come to confess something today, and I shan't beat about the bush, or the trellis for that matter. I'm done with most vegetables. That's right. I've decided after years of digging, weeding, nurturing, and being emotionally manipulated by heirloom tomatoes and twisted carrots, that I will now grow only English peas. Just peas, nothing else. People scoff, "Oh, Peter, what about variety?" To which I say, have you ever really sat in the garden on a dewy morning, popped open a fresh pod, and eaten peas so sweet they could file a restraining order against sugar? I have, and let me tell you, that's not just a snack. That's a spiritual awakening in a shell. Carrots, too needy. Potatoes, honestly a bit shifty, always hiding underground like they're up to something. Kale's the sort of plant that lectures you while you eat it. I mean, does anyone ever really like kale? But peas are humble. Peas don't ask for much. A bit of sun, a stick to climb, the occasional compliment. And in return, they give you joy and fibre and smugness at the farmer's market. I've already started sketching designs for a pea-only garden. Raised beds shaped like pods, an archway made of twining pea vines. I might even install a tiny plaque that reads, "Give peas a chance." My friends are concerned. "Peter, what will you do with all those peas?" And to them I say, that's a quitter's question. I shall eat them fresh, freeze them, mush them, puree them, gift them, juggle them. If need be, I'll bathe in them. I don't expect everyone to understand. Some people fall in love with roses, some with orchids. I have chosen the humble Pisum sativum, and she chose me back. And if that's madness, well, pass me the trowel and call me daft, because I've never felt saner. Peace be with you.
All right, so, I adore Peter, and I love that he loves English peas so much, but only having a garden of English peas? I'd miss my tomatoes too much.
But the heart loves what the heart loves, Danielle. And if it's English peas, then why would you not want more?
Mushy peas are where it's at, apparently. Oh my goodness. All right, so we've all, like Peter included, have talked about growing vegetables on the East Coast. I thought it would be really interesting to see what an expert on the West Coast in California has to say about her all-time favorite veggies. All right, so you guys are in for a podcast treat today. Most of the time you hear from Carol and I, who are East Coast coastal gardeners, and today we're going to go all the way to the West Coast for our honored guest. Can you introduce yourself?
Hey Danielle, I'm Fionuala Campion. I'm over here in Petaluma, Northern California, just about 45 miles north of San Francisco, out in the country. And we're Zone 9B, which just might be the best place ever to grow vegetables. So I am really, really excited to be here today to talk veggies.
I feel like you are the ultimate optimist gardener, Fionuala, because most gardeners, when you ask them, they go, this is the worst place and the most challenging place to garden. And you're like, no, Petaluma is the best.
It really is. We are having a cooler summer than normal this year, and people are complaining a little bit about it, but I tell you, the veggies are responding. Tomatoes are thrilled to bits. The greens are not frying because we haven't had those scorching heat waves. The only thing that I can tell you that's a little bit unhappy are the peppers, especially the hot peppers. Hot peppers want hot weather to develop, to get hot, and they're just kind of sitting around and barely blooming. But the sweet peppers are kind of doing something. But other than
All
that,
right. Well, wait. We've still got to get through all of August here, so we never know. The peppers might catch up. Well, Fionnuala, I immediately thought of you as being our guest on this episode all about favorite veggies because I got the special honor to visit you at Cottage Gardens of Petaluma last year, an amazing nursery that you own, and you have this incredibly special spot on the property of the nursery. You have a staff vegetable garden,
yes,
right?
we do. It keeps expanding a little bit, but it's just a great veggie garden. We try to grow things there all year, grow something. We're doing some seed saving, but we grow to test out the veggies that I'm growing, to share them with each other so that everybody who works here can take home something pretty much every day. So it's pretty intensive, pretty crammed full of everything. It's really quite a jungle. I was a little bit better this year than I was last year, where I just grew everything all at once on one spot. But, a little bit more paced out and spaced out this year. But I tell you, despite the weather, the vegetables in that garden, and I'll send you pictures later, they are just thriving and growing and looking amazing. And I picked the first squash and I picked the first tomatoes already, and they taste so good despite this cooler weather. We planted late even, not till I think the middle of May. And yeah, and it's astonishing. I'll definitely send you pictures.
Oh, please do, please do. And we'll put them in the show notes for listeners who aren't watching us on YouTube right now. If you're just listening to the audio, go to finegardening.com, click on that podcast tab, and we'll have pictures of Fionnuala's beautiful vegetable garden and the veggies that she's going to tell us about right now. Fionnuala, when I sent you the email and we chatted and I said, okay, pick your all-time favorite 3, maybe 4 veggies, what's the first thing that came to mind?
Oh my goodness. Well, the first one was slight panic. How do I narrow it down? And I was like, no. But then it was easy. I pictured myself with a very small garden and I could only grow 4 things or 3 things, and I knew exactly what I was going to grow. So I'll jump right in.
All right, drum roll.
Yeah, I'll jump right in. I love this particular summer squash called Tromboncino or Zucchetta rampicante. Absolutely love this thing for a whole bunch of reasons. It's an heirloom. It's an Italian heirloom brought here by Italian farmers who just could not live without this. And it's an amazing squash. I mean, a really, really good reason people kept this going forever. The name kind of gives it away. It's either called Tromboncino or Zucchetta rampicante. And rampicante means it runs rampant. And it really, really does.
Okay.
So I generally train it up a fence or over an arbor. One year at home in my garden, it ended up going up a tree. And that was incredible because it grew right up in the tree, didn't mind at all. And all these incredible squashes just hanging from the tree would just, it was magical to look at and funny. And the squash were happy and the plant was amazing. And the production is just out of this world, no matter what the summer is like. So yeah, that's the first one. The other great reason to grow this is you can harvest it when it's tiny with the flowers still on. And this is a tiny version of it.
So tiny, we're talking like 6 to 8 inches?
6 to 8 inches.
Maybe?
It'll still have the flower on it. And if you grow it up a thing, it'll be straight. If you grow it on the ground, it curls. So it's really pretty, and that's the tromboncino, like a trumpet or a trombone.
Like a trombone.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, how cool.
But if you forget...
Now, I feel like people get very nervous when it's not a standard green zucchini or a standard yellow squash. So what can we expect for a taste? I mean, does this taste like chewing on a trombone?
The taste is amazing. But before we even get to there, you can forget about it, leave it on the squash vine, and it keeps going and going and going. I have picked one that was 4 feet long. I know, I know. And you can still cook it, or you can save it. It lasts forever and turns itself into a winter squash. It's quite amazing. But the
Wow. Oh, that's
taste
so
is
cool.
so delicious. It's mild, nutty. The seeds are just down one end of it, so you're not dealing with seeds the whole way. It's
Oh, okay.
fascinating. Fascinating.
So the neck has kind of more of like a meatier texture than what we'd be, used to with maybe like a zucchini.
Yes. But when you're cutting
Okay.
into it, it cuts into it just like a zucchini. If you're cooking it like any summer squash, it cooks just like a summer squash when you cook it young.
Okay.
And the taste is just really good. It's a little more dense, a little more almost potato-like, less watery, less watery. It's
Oh,
fabulous. And yeah,
wow.
I always have to grow that one. My kids with gardens have to grow it. I highly recommend
And is
it.
this is this because it runs so rampant and it sounds like it's a pretty lush, vibrant plant. Does it require a lot of fertilizer, a lot of water? I mean, what are the care requirements for it through the
You know,
season?
I was thinking ahead about answering that. I was thinking about its care requirements, and literally hardly any. It's I've seen it growing in Italy in those, olive tree kind of gardens where they don't have a ton of water. Any water that they need
Yeah.
to get to their garden, they're trucking it in or bucketing it in. It still is going to produce squash for them. Um,
Oh,
Here where we have
wow.
irrigation, it's on the lighter side. You don't need to water it as much as you would a regular summer squash, and it still will go way up a tree and produce as many squash as it possibly can. And minimal
Okay.
fertilizer needs too. It's
Okay.
very,
Wow.
very easy to grow. Yeah.
That sounds like my type of vegetable. I am all about, chuck it in the ground, forget about it until you look up and go, "Wow,
Yes.
it's doing
How did
something.
it
This
do
is
that?
great."
How did it do that? How did I grow myself a baseball bat that still tastes good? It's
I love it. I love
yeah.
it. All right. Well, so I'm just going to go out on a limb and think there has to be a tomato on your list. Am I right or
Yes.
am I
Yes.
wrong?
I know.
Okay.
That is snow white cherry tomato. It is
Oh.
incredible. Now when it comes to a tomato, they call them a white tomato. They're never white, but it is a very pale yellow, um,
Okay.
incredibly tasty, incredibly productive. It wants to be 8 or 9 feet tall, and it's
Okay.
indeterminate. So those tomatoes going the whole way up. And I have harvested it, and it's really a tough plant. I've harvested tomatoes all the way up to Thanksgiving off the snow white that I grow. Yeah.
Wow. And when will it start producing Fanula? Is it because it's a cherry tomato? Is this like, 60 days, 55
It's a
days?
55-day one here for us. Um, we
Okay.
planted our garden in May here at Cottage, and I've been harvesting little snow white cherries towards the bottom of the plant for at least 2 or 3 weeks now. It's quite amazing. And
Wow.
this is in suboptimal weather. Like, the fog is
Yep.
still here. It's going to burn off, but we're not getting that heat that most tomatoes really love.
Yep.
Yeah. So where I live, we are very much influenced by the coastal weather. The sea is only 20 something miles as the crow flies, and the fog hits us every day, pretty much in the summer. So a lot of the tomatoes that we grow have to do well in cooler weather. So you could probably do it everywhere you are too, with the shorter
Yes, yes,
season. Yeah.
absolutely.
And I
Yep.
know it works in San Francisco, which really doesn't get sun hardly at all. Um, but not
Yeah.
just that, it tastes great. It really, really tastes so good. It's pretty in any salad, tomato salad, mixed tomatoes. It's pretty, slightly larger than a Sweet 100, really
Okay.
pale yellow, really crack resistant, really disease resistant. But it tastes amazing.
Okay.
That's really why I grow it, is the taste. Explosion of fresh tomato, low acid, really great taste.
Okay, all right. Well, that's also good to know as well, just because, we talked about a little bit earlier, and Carol and I in the episode, we were just having a sidebar about, certain people can't deal with the acidity with tomatoes. So a lot of, the pineapple varieties, or, the yellow varieties, they tend to be able to do a little bit more because they're not, the gastrointestinal issues associated with really acidic tomatoes does well for them. So this is a lower acid tomato then, and good for fresh
Oh,
eating.
so good for fresh eating. I cannot keep up with my tomato. My one Snow White tomato that at this point has reached 9 feet tall, still producing so many tomatoes. I pick handfuls of them, if not, whole containers full of them, throw them in the freezer, and then I've got tomatoes for months. You just get a handful of little frozen rock hard tomatoes from the freezer, pop them in whatever soup or stew that you really want that tomato flavor. So you get the full tomato flavor, low acidity, really productive, really disease-free. It is a really great tomato.
Oh my gosh, it sounds delicious and so unique. Snow White, a white albino tomato. I'll call it an albino tomato. I
Yeah,
love it.
yeah.
I love it.
And you get these clusters, and they also, the little cluster seems to ripen all at the same time. And yeah, I don't know, there's something really special. And kids love it too. The things don't crack even if it does rain. So Snow White is a great tomato that I always have to grow.
I love it. I love that. I never would have picked that you were going to pick a white tomato, but you're full of surprises,
Oh my
Fionnuala.
goodness.
All right. So, okay, we're rounding out our vegetable garden here. And what was the final installment that made your list that you said, "Oh, I got to talk about this.
Yeah.
There's no other
Oh,
room."
I was narrowing it down. I love eggplant. I really, really love them.
Oh,
Where I'm from in Ireland, they're called aubergine, and that's just such a beautiful word for a start. So I've always had a love for eggplants. I love eggplant parmigiana. I love them broiled, all kinds of things. But I also love the beauty of them, and I love the history of them. So my favorite eggplant of all is Listada de Gandia. It is so beautiful. It is a beautiful eggplant. It's either white with purple stripes or purple with white stripes. It's just a gorgeous eggplant. And it's very mild and very thin-skinned. And all the instructions say it likes a lot of heat. But again, it does really great here where we're not guaranteed a hot summer and we're not even guaranteed a sunny day. And it is really productive, really delicious, and a beautiful, beautiful eggplant and a beautiful plant. So I've grown that. I grow that one every year too. I just love it.
and is eggplant for you, or this particular variety of eggplant, how many days to maturity are we talking about, Fionnuala? Because we do historically think of eggplant as heat loving and needing that heat, especially to get
Yeah.
going.
It says on its instructions, I believe what it says is 77 to 85 days. Here where I am, it's
Okay.
closer to the 75, kind of right there in the middle. I'm in California though, so I don't know what it's going to be like for you to grow it. You'd probably grow it in a greenhouse or something to get that extra heat, maybe.
Sure, sure. Or start out the seedlings with bottom heat to really get, when you're planting out transplants, get them a little bit beefier.
Ah, okay. We planted them the same time as everything else in the veggie garden, middle of May. They're blooming and there's little tiny eggplants on them now.
Oh
Yeah.
my
So I
gosh.
think it was a
And
little
how much
slower.
production?
Pardon?
How much production off of one plant? How many eggplants are we going to harvest?
Listada is not as productive as some of the Japanese eggplants. Listada de Gandia is
Okay.
a Spanish eggplant, and there's all kinds of things. It's an Italian heirloom. It's not, but Listada de Gandia means it's stripy and it's from Gandia, which is a town in Valencia, in Spain.
Yeah.
So it really, I suppose, wants Spain weather, which we don't exactly
Hmm.
have. And I would imagine over there they probably would get more per plant. But to me,
Hmm.
the the shape of it, I've gotten 3 one year, 5 another year, kind of depending on the summer, per plant.
Okay.
One year I got 7, but that was a really great summer. A
Okay.
miracle, I think. But It's so beautiful. It's okay that it only gives you a few, I think. You just grow more of them because
Perfect.
I love a vegetable that decorates the garden while it's growing, and it is so beautiful that,
And now talk to me about the skin. I've been taught traditionally that when you're going into the aubergines, into the eggplants, that if it's a paler skin, a white eggplant, sometimes that very, very pale lilac color that you'll get with some of the Japanese, a thinner
yeah,
skin. Is that the case with this
I've
variety?
certainly found that. And that's why I was thinking it's probably a white with purple stripes because it has that. I've grown Paloma, which is a beautiful white one. I've grown this slender little Gretel, which are great. I really like those too. And they're pretty. They're really nice and thin-skinned. The white definitely are the thinner skinned ones. And when you grow Black Beauty, they all taste great. There's not one eggplant I've ever grown that I don't like, but some of them are thicker skinned. You always have to peel them. And I have
Mm-hmm.
not had to peel Listata, which is nice, one less step.
Exactly, because at that point you're just hungry. You've been in
Yeah,
the garden
yeah,
all day. You just want to eat, baby. You don't want to sit there in the kitchen for
no,
hours and hours.
exactly.
Amazing, amazing. Well, Fanula, thank you so much for taking time out. I mean, for anyone who's watching this on YouTube, you're getting to see Fanula in some of her production fields with how many plants and how much she has to do on a daily basis. I'm so honored that you took time out for
Ah,
us.
you are very welcome, Danielle. This was so much fun. I could have talked about three more vegetables at least, but you know what? It's really good to focus on what's my actual favorite. It makes me look at them again and look forward to harvesting them.
Love it, love it. All right, well, enjoy the rest of your summer and happy vegetable
Oh,
growing.
thank you. Thank you. Bye bye, Danielle. You have a great day.
Bye. All right, Carol. Well, it turns out that growing the vegetables is a little bit different on the West Coast, but the varieties we could still put into our gardens here in New England.
Yeah, I feel like that's one of the coolest things about vegetable gardens is that almost anyone anywhere could be growing the same things in
That's
the middle
per
of summer. Yeah.
It's the universal gardening. It's the universal gardening.